Hey guys, how are you? So here's a little overview I'm going to give you. This is kind of more like a talk or a lecture or something that I want you to watch on YouTube to get credit and just like it, and I'll know that you watched it. So on the Renaissance overview, there's three main Renaissance artists that I want you to just be familiar with. Here's four over here. I like to do these four because these are the four Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? Raphael, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and this one is by Donatello, okay? And I'm just going to explain them a little bit real quick. This is one of their famous works, okay? Raphael painted St. George and the Dragon. We're going to look at a little more. Leonardo's most famous work is probably the Mona Lisa, the most famous portrait in the world. And Michelangelo made the most famous statue in the world, I believe, today. It's called David. It's King David about to fight Goliath, the giant. There's a rock in this hand and a sling on his shoulder. So he's going to go fight a giant, okay? Now, Donatello lived before these guys. He was, he could have been like their grandfather. So they might not have known each other. This is a life-size bronze, the first life-size bronze made in Europe since the ancient Greeks. So this is David again. Here's Goliath's head down here. In this one, David just used this sword to cut off Goliath's head. Okay, and I think the rock is still in his hand. Okay, so this is the same subject matter. Okay, except this is metal. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at the first one, Raphael. These three guys all lived in a city, Florence, Italy. It's pretty amazing. They all came from the same city, more or less. He was born on April 6th. Look at that, 1483, and he died on April 6th, 1520. Okay, so these three works of art that I'm going to show you were all made about the same year even, which is really interesting. St. George and the Dragon was made in 1504. This version, same artist, Raphael, painted St. George and the Dragon in 1505. The David over here was made in 1505. Finished it in 1505, okay? Took him 5 years to make it. Started it in 1500 even. And the Mona Lisa was painted in 1505. So you have three of the greatest works of art ever made in about the same year, 1505. You have the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. You have David by Michelangelo. And you have St. George and the Dragon by Raphael, all in Florence, Italy. These guys were so famous that they got called to Rome to do work. And that's where the Pope lived, who was the richest guy in the world at the time. And check this out. Raphael started doing a lot of religious art for the Pope. This is called the Madonna and Child, okay? People love these. They thought they were so sweet. Michelangelo, who wanted to be a sculptor only, was forced by the Pope to do paintings. He did the Sistine Chapel. You might have heard this is on a ceiling. This is very famous right here. This is supposed to be God creating Adam, bringing him to life. So this is called the creation of Adam. And it's huge. The figures are way more than life size. And they're on the ceiling. And they're in plaster, painted right on the stone of the ceiling. Okay, so here's another scene from that. He tells the whole story of the Bible. This is supposed to be Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And this is the devil giving them an apple to eat. Okay? And they eat it, and then the angel kicks them out of the garden. They get kicked out for disobeying. Okay, and here's one. They've cleaned these recently, the Sistine Chapel, so they're much brighter. This is supposed to be God making Eve, the creation of Eve. He puts Adam to sleep, and Eve comes out of his rib here. Okay, so he's really famous now for his paintings as well. Here's a nice close-up of that, of them with the apple. This is the devil, the snake, and they're eating the apple from the tree, Adam and Eve. Okay, here's an assortment of some of his sculptures. Okay, he loved carving marble sculptures. Okay, that was Michelangelo's thing, and he lived the longest to be the oldest. He died when he was 89 years old, and he died in 1564. Leonardo and Raphael died about the same time. In 1519 Leonardo died, and Raphael died in 1520. So almost the same year. Raphael died young. He got a disease like the flu, and he died young. Leonardo was pretty old. I think Leonardo was about 65 or 70. The Renaissance ended. We have a sharp date for the end of the Renaissance, and it was because Rome was conquered by a guy called the Holy Roman Emperor. Sacked Rome, they called it. That means they looted all the buildings, stole all the money. So then there was no more money. The Pope lost all his money and his fortune. There was no more money to pay for all this stuff. So in 1527, we say the Renaissance ended, pretty much. So it started about 1427, the High Renaissance, and it lasted about 100 years. People were spending fortunes on art, okay? Everybody wanted to have a sculpture by Michelangelo, or a painting by Leonardo, or a painting by Raphael. Oh, one last painting I want to show you before we go, by Leonardo. Now, Da Vinci just means he's from Vinci. That's the town he was born in. That's all his last name means. He's from Vinci. Okay, here's his second most famous work. It's called The Last Supper. This is what it looks like today. It's kind of destroyed because he mixed oil and water to make the paint on plaster. But this copy down here looks pretty good. And why people think this is so famous? He did the same thing he did with the Mona Lisa. Here's Jesus's head is even with the horizon, if you can see that. See, the grass is even with his eyes. And the roof points, all the diagonal lines point right to Jesus's head. Now what's funny is, let's go up to the Mona Lisa. Same thing. Look, he has the water here is even with Mona Lisa's eyes. And what lines point to her face? Her shoulders point to her face. Her shoulders point to her face. So everything, look, if you think of the mountains as a diagonal line, they're pointing to her eyes. So everything's pointing to her eyes. I think that was his great trick, putting the horizon even with the eyes. It makes you stare at the eyes, okay? So one last time, we have Leonardo, okay? We have Michelangelo, Buonarroti was his last name, and Raphael, if you want to know, Sanzio was his last name, okay? And those are your three great Renaissance artists that you should know. Thank you, guys.